Alright, today in this video, I wanted to take some time to just go through a Nexus-Point 16 key that this group was able to get done on beta. Now, it wasn't in time. We were about a minute over with like a couple of deaths, but I want to talk about the mechanics, the overall vibes, how Brewmaster plays in here specifically, and just kind of nerd out for a little bit of time. So before we get started, I will have my talents probably come up on screen at some point just to show you what I was running. Actually, you can see it here, but I'll also leave a link down below for like the import string if you want to play with this build. This has been my go-to build for testing. It feels extremely durable. It also does significant damage. I could get a little bit more damage from playing things like Counter-Strike, for example, but I'm opting to drop Counter-Strike for other talents that I think make the gameplay and the game flow feel a little bit better. You'll also notice that my UI looks a little different from previous beta videos. I have been experimenting with UI stuff lately, and I happen to have the UI stuff enabled for this run. I think it's Nef's UI is mostly it. I also have Sexy Map enabled, but I think that's really it. Those are the only two like major add-ons that I'm utilizing in this video. So that's why my like health bar, for example, is kind of in the middle of my screen. My action bar has also been, I think it's about the same distance, but as beta has been developing, add-on developers and players alike have been able to kind of figure out what works, what doesn't, and ways to still customize your UI without obviously being countered by Blizzard's secret values and black boxes. Anyways, getting into it, Nexus-Point Xenas was not a dungeon that I particularly was looking forward to. My experience with on alpha was extremely buggy and overtuned. I did not test it the first time it came around, so this is not my first time in here. I tested it earlier in the week, but this is the first time doing it on anything higher than like a 12. So we're going to start off and going to the left-hand side. Now, this is a linear dungeon in the sense where you have two hallways that you can choose to go down either one. You have to go down both eventually, but you can choose whether you want to go to kind of the ethereal side or like the void walker side is what I'll kind of call it. So we're opting to go left first, which I believe is the second boss? Maybe. So you do actually end up spending a fair bit of time running up to the first pole, which is a little annoying, especially when you have two Death Knights. Unholy DK has been also performing really well. They actually received a sizable nerf last week, and they're still doing just insane damage. And of course, we're playing with Augavoker. Now in this area, you have a couple of guys who are just meleeing the tank. You have a couple of casters with the kind of Arcanists that we're going to try to pull here. Now there are also a couple of mini bosses that I'll point out. They're not mini bosses, but like slightly more dangerous mobs that you are going to want to try to avoid. Now, luckily, I think yesterday at the time of by the time I'm recording this video, I believe Blizzard has gone ahead and actually pushed a hotfix to this dungeon and has nerfed a lot of the damage by like a significant amount. So earlier on in the week, it was heavily overtuned. So we have the Shadow Guard defenders that are really just doing a little bit of tank damage. We have some bolts going off in the back that just need to be kicked. Even on the 16, it was doing, 50% of 40% of someone's health. So it won't really one-shot, and because there's not a lot of environmental damage going on, it's pretty chill. There's also a dot that gets applied. As you can see, it's being healed off of our evoker. And yeah, that's it. So we're just progressing down. Now, this hallway is split up in such a way where you have different like pipes and beams splitting across, trying to make the hallway a little less boring, a little less static. So you can choose to like hug left side or right side, depending on how you're going to pull. I don't know what I'm pulling in here in terms of like routes. We end up being around 100% by the end of the dungeon, a little bit over. So the route ended up being fine, but I don't know what's on the left side of this hallway. It just looked more dangerous in my opinion. And I see a lot of players and other tank VODs that I've seen, they all hug right. So I hug right because I am a sheep. I follow what the other people do. Now these pulls, it was kind of a big chain here, but we eventually get that down. Now it's these circuit seers that are extremely dangerous, but they have been nerfed by like, I think their AoE damage was nerfed by like 75% if I remember correctly. Now the animations in this dungeon are a little weird because you see to like the left of my character right now, there's like this like pylon that's channeling and it has a health bar. I don't know what it's doing. If it's doing anything, if it's doing damage to us, if it's empowering the mobs that I'm tanking near it. Kind of hard to tell. Didn't really know. So we're just kind of ignoring it right now. It looks like it's maybe spawning circles. Again, I have no idea. This dungeon's kind of cool though. Like I really appreciate when Blizzard finds an asset that they really, really like. I think the ethereal stuff at the end of the War Within was really cool. I thought the Mana Forge Omega raid was awesome. Outside of the fact that Dimensius and Nexus King exist. But like the environment is awesome. So keeping the ethereals, keeping like the cool arcane visual effects and the arcane energy flowing throughout, I think is like a nice touch. And it actually, this dungeon has good vibes in terms of its aesthetics. We also have these engineers. These engineers are interesting because when they die, they drop like an explosive barrel that needs to be killed off before it finishes its channel, which I'll point out when it does eventually drop here. As for Brewmaster, it feels incredibly tanky. I feel like I'm seeing a pretty heavy DH kind of meta in the beta right now. I'm not trying to say it's meta, it's just overtuned and it's doing really well and it's very fun to play. So VDH is what I think a lot of tank testers are opting to play currently, but I think Brewmaster's up there. It has really good self-sustain through a lot of its different abilities, I know, surprising. Celestial Brew is a little undertuned. Celestial Infusion doesn't work. So those are some things I'd like to see addressed in future builds. But in terms of its actual like ability to mitigate damage and sustain itself, fairly high, especially as you get into larger pulls with things like Vital Flame. So here's that mana battery that I was talking about. We end up blowing it up very, very quickly. And then here's that like pylon thing again. I ran by it. I don't think it keeps us in combat, but I don't know what it does. But I saw some more engineers kind of hanging out here. They seemed like pretty easy mobs after that first pull or that last pull. So I was like, yeah, fuck it. Let's pull in 2 more. Obviously, the player with the circles are going to spread out. They're kind of radiating AoE damage, so they want to make sure that they're not stacked. And that's pretty much it. So a little melee unfriendly. Like, let's say you have 3 melee instead of 2. It could be a little annoying to play with a lot, but also it shouldn't really matter if it's only ever going to be on 2 people max. And it seems like there's a way to remove it. I don't know if it doesn't look like it's dispellable because it would glow blue. Maybe like meld or some kind of immunity removed it, I think. Maybe it's like maybe Aug Evoker was able to remove it with their Cauterize. So I'm kind of waiting to chain because I knew this mana battery was going to drop, even though the pull felt pretty safe, so I could have probably brought it into the next pack as well. So a lot of times when you're testing a dungeon like this, especially when it's like one of your first times in here, you're really trying to pay attention to which mobs are doing what. And the way that my brain, I will try to generally figure, like what I generally try to do is I don't focus on everything because it's really overwhelming to be like trying to figure out what every little mob does in every single dungeon. So what I'll do is I'll kind of go in and I'll try to understand the general damage palette from pull to pull. So like, oh, the group's not really taking a lot of damage here. Maybe it's safer to pull big or small. If I die to anything, I will look at a quick recap to try to figure it out. And then in cases like this, I'll go back and I'll look at footage like, oh, okay, it was this tank buster that I didn't know was a tank buster that hit me and killed me. Or, oh, maybe it was actually like a ton of melee damage. And, you know, I'll also actually have combat logs available, so I'm able to like look and see the finer details. So I generally, the first time playing it through, I like to see the aesthetics. I like to kind of focus on like which pulls have more group damage versus like tank damage. And then as I come in here again in future testing, I will start to be like, okay, I really want to figure out like what's the limit of how much I can pull in this area. Or I really want to focus on like the first time I played through, I didn't really know what the kind of the mini boss difficult adds did. Like what do they do entirely? Like what abilities do they have in their kit? What does their damage palette look like? So I'll focus on like specific mobs. And so that's kind of how I process this. I don't try to get it all in one run and try to figure everything out because it's kind of difficult to do that. Oh, anyways, this is the first boss of the dungeon. Sorry, we went to the first boss first. Good. So this is Kasrith, Chief Korite. Oh my god, I can't. Whatever. English. This boss to me seems really, really boring. So basically what's going to happen is throughout the fight, she is going to spawn beams that intersect the room, kind of quadranting it up. I don't even know. That's not even English. And then he's going to target a player with like an arrow over their head. And then that player can disable the beams by standing in said beams. So you'll see it here. Here's the beams coming out. We're going to make sure we're kicking the buster. Here's the reflux charge going on our druid, who's then going to stand in between the beams on the intersection there, and then it's going to disable both of those beams and are going to get stunned for a short second. Do you have to disable the beams? Not necessarily, but you want enough space to dodge like the giant orb that ends up coming down. So basically the boss will do this twice, activating a couple beams, having someone disable them, and that's it. Then we got this Core Spark detonation, which does this, like he channels this big orb, and then targets it at like the biggest clump of players. and then you can just move away, dodge, and knocks you back. It applies the healing absorb, and then your goal is to obviously get the healing absorb off everyone. And there's no like AoE group damage going out after that. So if you survive the one shot, which we are doing in the 16 just fine, the healer just has to top you off before you get the reflex charge like 10-15 seconds later. So I think this fight's pacing is designed really well. I just think it's a little boring in my, like, for a tank. When you have a boss that doesn't have a tank buster and it's really just like kick bolts, the boss's difficulty fluctuates based on if you have a kick rotation or not. And in high keys, that's fine because you'll have a kick rotation. But in like low keys and pugs, like, it also shouldn't matter because you're probably pugging and you're probably doing lower content. But it's just like random influx of damage, or the bolt's not tuned high enough to be dangerous at all, so you can just like let it go off. And then you also have the other problem of like Prot Warrior exists who can spell reflect. And if that's the case, then obviously warriors are a really good asset to have in that case. And we're seeing that in The War Within Season 3, where there's a lot of bosses that can have spell reflecting bolts. Anyways, after the fight, you channel the thing, you get teleported back to the start, and then you go down the other hallway. So that's like the major choice you have here, go left or right first. What will end up being meta or the most efficient route kind of depends. I don't know what I don't know what the best route is going to be. I haven't played this dungeon enough to really grasp like how big can you go on either side with Lust and with CDs up, which is more efficient for that. That's obviously a pretty important question to ask. All right, so this void side, the right side of the dungeon has the void mobs. And so what's going on here is you have grand nullifiers who do some casts. This nullify, you want to make sure you're kicking that. And you're seeing all these like fixating smudges. These smudges are going towards these non-interactable NPC mobs that you can see that have a health bar. If they connect, it's kind of like the flood from Halo, where they like attach to that thing and then that ad becomes alive. And so you don't want the smudges to reach those hosts, I guess is the best way to describe it. The hosts spawn, or the smudges spawn from mobs dying. They have like debuffs on them, so when they die, they drop them. And then also some of these other mobs happen to spawn them as well frequently throughout combat. So it's like these null sentinels, and I think we end up pulling in another pack here. I think my healer felt like we needed to pull bigger, so or Evoker maybe, I don't know. Someone tagged him, which ends up being okay. Now, I don't know what that tank frontal was, but it looked like both beams were on me, and I have 2 debuffs right now. There's not a good telegraph for it, and if it does end up clipping players, I'd like a better telegraph for it, so I make sure I'm not hitting my friends or the people I'm playing with. But outside of that, these mobs are like kind of chill. Now, one thing that's really hard to notice is I might have to point it out on a different poll because I think we killed the mob already, or we just killed it. So we're going to keep that smudge away using Ring of Peace. There's one mob that I'm blanking on the name, that like spawns like little arrows pointing out, or like little there's like directional points from the model, and it spawns like little ads that come out. Like not ads, but it's essentially like reversioned orbs. Like they're not orbs, they look like little men, and the little men will deal damage to you. And I think I don't know if they stun you or fear you or something, but maybe it was that on alpha. But it's these guys here that's casting this leech on me. If I'd ever actually target the important mob, maybe I'll be able to point it out. And of course, in post, I'll probably try to zoom in. So here's those like arrows, like those little directional things. You're seeing them like point out in either direction. Then you're seeing the ghosts radiate outwards. And so those ghosts you don't want to stand in because it does, I think it does big damage, and it might CC you in some capacity. So you definitely need to be careful. Now, one thing that I noticed here is I'm tanking this guy right in the middle of 2 hosts that are like potentially. So the smudges are going in opposite directions. So ideally, I'd probably try to pull them to a different spot, because now you can see them like trying to go to, they're going somewhere. I don't know where, but they're trying to connect with one of these like host bodies. And then we're moving into kind of the boss room. Now, big complaint here. I've never been a fan of this type of mechanic in dungeons because it feels, I don't want to use the word oppressive, but it like slows down the pacing of your run. So we just triggered the first activation of a gauntlet to spawn or engage the second boss, which is the Core Warden Nysara. So the issue with this is that it ruins your momentum. You're like blasting cooldowns. You get to dictate how big or small you want to pull, and then you get here and it's like, well, you're always going to pull 4 targets, and they're 4 targets that we have chosen for you. And that's where that's where I lose interest in Mythic Plus dungeon routing stuff. Obviously the dungeon's fine. I don't like RP stuff like this too. We've seen it like almost in every season. There's some type of dungeon that has some type of RP element. I mean, same could be said for streets, for example. Like I don't like going into the Oasis and having to do a boss fight but have to deal with like an ad set first, you know? Like that feels bad. Luckily, Blizzard did make good changes back in streets. So these lingering images are weird. So they do like a double hit tank buster, but it fervents. And it's actually ended up causing a few deaths later on because I was like aware, but I wasn't aware because I thought there was like a range to it. But if you get far out of range from the lingering image when it does its tank buster on the tank, if the tank's not in range, I don't know what it is, maybe 20, 30, 40 yards. If the tank's out of range, your melee or whoever has threat is just going to get slammed, and it's terrible. It's absolutely horrible. Another issue we ran into here is our DPS kept getting one-shot by something, and we didn't know what it was in the moments. We don't know if it's like a tuning thing. We don't know if it's like a fervent thing. We weren't really quite aware, and I didn't look at the log yet to actually figure it out. But anyways, we dealt with the second set, and now, or maybe that was the second set, or is this the second set? I don't remember, but basically we have to deal with a set amount of waves before we can go into the boss. Now, the one thing you can do in this area is there is nearby trash. So you could pull more trash into this area, or you could do something interesting where you like shroud or you invis skip through and then kind of run back. So right there, our DK died. One of our DKs died to a one-shot. We don't know what killed him. And so basically all of these pulls, we have just like one DPS alive. Kind of going back to like Brewmaster though, it feels really good to play right now. The rotation where you have random keg smash procs while playing the Apex talent is a little not jarring, but like it's interesting going from having like such a set stone cold rotation to having like this fluctuating kind of proc based thing. Something I'd like to see is if maybe Blizzard added it so keg smash would glow if you got a proc of your Apex Bring Me Another. Because right now when you do get a refresh, like it's obvious because it changes, and also like, well, it's obvious, but it's not obvious. And then also you're going to hit it anyways. So I don't know, like a nice glow though, like a glow effect would be cool for Apex Talent procs. Now it's also controlled via, so it's a 20% chance on Purifying Brew or any brew. And then it's controlled, like it's a 100% proc chance if you use Celestial Brew or Infusion, or you use Fortifying Brew as a cooldown. And so you can kind of control the flow of your keg smashes. So if you're out of energy, what's really cool about this is if you're out of energy and you're out of keg smashes, you can use Celestial Brew, which then gives you a free keg smash, and it resets a charge. And so I love this, but I think it diminishes haste even more than haste already is for the Brewmaster. Like, there's almost no reason now, if you're playing your Apex talents, in my opinion, to play any sort of haste, because energy, sometimes you might mess up and then you'd be energy starved for a second or two. But now it's like, well, you're getting free procs. If anything, there's times where I'm sitting at like full energy or above 50% energy, which is still surprising for a Brewmaster, right? Because Keg Smash is 40, being reduced down to 35 with the tier set, and then Tiger Palm and Spinning Crank is 25. So overall, pretty good. Anyways, this is the last set of the ad wave. Obviously, we've been here for a while. Being down DPS doesn't help. But also, this is why I don't like wave-based controlled RP from from Blizzard's end or from the dungeon end. So we're finally going to be moving on to the boss. And also something to point out, dude, the debuffs on the party frames are terrible. Maybe this is because I'm using Nef's UI and I have to like adjust it, but man, seeing like these debuffs take up so much of the player's frame, and then when someone uses like a defensive of sorts and it shows up in the middle of their bar and it's like mouse over tooltip and it's like non-interactable, so you have to like dodge, like you have to avoid clicking on it. It's just Blizzard still has some work to do. Anyways, this boss starts at 60% health, has a very, very big health pool, but you get a massive damage amp on this boss. In my opinion, it's pretty good. There is a tank buster. The tank buster makes you take 50% more damage for the duration, similar to Avanox from Arakara. The thing you want to be careful of is the tank buster overlapping with the Void Lash from the Dreadfall mob here, or Dreadflail mob. But then the boss gets hit by Lurthraxian's like image, and it starts this Light Scar Flare. Light Scar Flare is a 18-second channel that causes the boss to take like 200 or 300% more damage or something like that while you're standing in this beam. But when you're standing in the beam, you're taking like aura damage, you're taking environmental damage, and so your healer needs to make sure that they're having a good throughput there. DPS should probably maybe use like a soft defensive, and then you just stand in the beam and blast. And so this fight's weird because it's not a boss that feels like efficient outside of the burn because its health pool is so deep, but the burn feels really good. I'd like to think that this boss is a better design than like something like Rookery, like Void Monstrosity and Rookery, where you were hitting into an absorb shield the whole time until it broke and then got a damage amp. But yeah, that was so I died there, and that was a combination of the Dread Flail with the Tank Buster. And I wasn't thinking. I had Fortifying Brew available, I had Celestial Brew available, I could have topped myself with Expel Harm. I had so many options there that I just like didn't realize I'd die. So pretty dangerous fight, so I always like that. I think showcasing your skill as a tank is important, and I think it depends on, there are some bosses that are just like super anti-paladin or anti-warrior, anti-DK. But this boss felt pretty good despite the death. So player with big circle runs out. I didn't mention that earlier. The boss just like steps to them, but the boss doesn't actually move. It just like has an image go to the tank, which is nice. Like I'd hate the Sylvanas treatment where like the boss runs away basically to wherever the target drags the circle to. So the player just needs to get out. So we grip some stuff in. This time I'm committing Fortifying Brew because I had the debuff on me and the ad spawn, but it didn't overlap, so it ended up being okay. And then here comes the last burn. So Lothraxion is about to hit the man. Lights, the flare starts, and then we move in and we get big damage amp. And then the boss should die inside of this amp. So I think this fight's pretty good. I think it's going to take a little bit of practice from my end, because I think being surprised by the Tank Buster overlap with the ad spawning was just something I wasn't really prepared for, I guess. But it is a 16, so, you know, it's a little bit harder. Anyways, when you get here, you have to like channel the conduit, which then incaps you, and then you have to click on the conduit to go back to the start of the dungeon once again. We are on a pretty good pace. Unfortunately, 4 deaths, and then we have a couple more deaths up here. Definitely slow it down, and that's what causes us to end up failing this key. But overall, this ended up being a fine pace, and if we didn't have these extra mistakes, we would have been chilling. And so you now have to channel core access power. The more people channeling it, the quicker it channels up. And then we're just gonna pull some more trash. So none of these mobs we've really seen before. We've seen the image of Lothraxion earlier. He does a similar thing where he does this like double slash on the tank that knocks you from side to side. And then he does a frontal. And then what's Blistering Smite? Is that like a dot? Yeah, okay. It's a pretty nasty dot that goes on a player, and then he does a frontal here, I believe. I pulled some more fire bats and these like little firefly looking things. These things fixate random players, and yeah, you just want to like kite them away or kite them through the DPS pack. Of course, having Death Knights, Typhoon. You have the Drakthir knock, which I don't remember. It's not Tail Sweep. It's their like Wing Gust or what. I don't know. I'm just making stuff up. I know nothing about dragons. But things like Ring of Peace are like great tools for keeping the ads in melee away from the fixated targets. It seems like they're prioing our range players, which is good. Actually, we have one on our DK. Never mind. Total lie. It's good though. Or was it no, it wasn't a meld. Not really sure. The frontal seems to be targeted on the tank as well. So tanks do want to be a little cautious about where they're positioning and where they're aiming the frontal from these images. I prefer tank-based frontals compared to random frontals in trash pulls, because it's nice to have that agency as a tank to be like, I'm going to choose to aim the guy here and make sure my DPS are like being cognizant of that and being like, okay, if I stand here and face it this way, my DPS won't have to move. Anyways, I don't know what happened up there, but like I ran away to thinking that the ad was at 1% health. And then I think if you stand in the circle, he heals based on the people he hits, maybe. I don't know. I need to look into the ability. But I turned around and next thing I knew, there was a mob that was dead. And I was like, or that the mob was still alive and I thought it was dead. I was like, oh, that's weird. These light spawn looking guys, these light wraith? However, I don't know how to pronounce that word. Light Roth. Really annoying. All they do is spam bolts, and the bolts look like they apply a dot, from my understanding. They also have a really, really far range, and they spam it. So it's really difficult to kick and move. So I'm going to kick here. I'm going to try to move with it, and then it's just going to stand there. And I don't know if it's a bridge issue. Like he just didn't move. Maybe it's a bridge thing. I don't know. Maybe I should have actually done more research into this dungeon before making a video on it. Oh well, YOLO. Giant frontal coming out again. Good on group for mostly dodging it. Maybe some people got hit there. So yeah, these the fireflies are a little annoying with the fixate, but if you can kite them into melee, they should go down relatively quickly. Kicking bolts is important, and then yeah, like I said, these light wraith, or the sorry, not light wraith, these lingering images, these lingering men, they have their abilities are fervent, so I think it's about to happen as well. So I think I roll away and it kills someone, or maybe it already happened. I can't remember. I thought someone died to the fervent, but once again, these like light rods are just like, please move. All right, there we go. And then you have to defeat both of these like lingering images to spawn the boss. Now they definitely reduce the amount of trash on this platform, but our percentage actually ended up looking just fine. So this route works for now. I thought the route was pretty okay. Definitely could have pulled bigger in some areas, but not being familiar with the dungeon definitely will do that to a player. And then we can move on to the final boss fight. So I'm gonna just fast forward a little bit here. All right, so I pull in Lothy Boy when he was about to die. Very similar tank buster here. There's the rend. It applies a dot. So this is when you're going to be using a big defensive or a defensive or some type of mitigation. Then he's going to Brilliant Dispersion. This is going to target a couple players, leaving these circles, which will then leave images of Lothi. And so then the mini game here is going to be similar to like Lords of Dread from Sepulchre. You're going to have to like find the standout image. We're going to play a little Where's Waldo here. Now, as you can see, if you look really closely, the different images he spawns all have horns. Lothraxion does not have horns, or if he does, they're like weird looking, they're really weird nubs on his head. I think those are his ears, though. I don't know. I don't know Lothraxion lore. So he's going to do Divine Guile. He's then going to basically trade places with one of these images, and you want to then kick the image that doesn't have horns. So I'm looking around, trying to find it. I see him right behind me, actually. Turning around. He's right in the middle. Kick him. Oh my god. Fucking idiot. Takes too long. So there he was. So this is actually my first time seeing this mechanic. Yeah. Kind of my first time seeing it. If you play with a hunter, unless they fixed this by now, if a hunter has hunter's mark on the target, it'll actually just stay over his head. So you can kick him immediately because you know exactly where he's at. So hunters could be pretty broken in here. But yeah, that's like the rotation of the fight. So it's like tank buster, images spawn, tank buster, images spawn, and then he does his divine guile or whatever it's called, and you have to just find his image, which isn't too bad. It's like a nice little guessing game. Now I don't know what happens when you kick the wrong target. I don't know if it's like a damage. I don't know if it applies damage. I don't know if it buffs him. I don't know like what it is, but you also want to be careful when he does his divine guile. He sucks you in, and he'll knock you back in the direction. So you want to move out in a way that you don't get knocked into a pool on the ground or off the edge, for example. And so I'm looking around, I see him right in front of me, bam, get the kick, and we're good to go. So the ping system's great for this. If you have someone you're playing with who's like really good at identifying where the correct guy is who can kick, that's great. I feel really bad for healer players who are generally like pretty good at this. You know, I've played with a few healer players in the past who like they're really good at this type of mechanic, and now them not having the ability to kick is probably going to frustrate them. So rest in peace. Healer kicks, but pretty good fight. So overall, I think Nexus-Point Xenas it's not my favorite. I don't think it's bad in any way. I think it still needs a couple of nerfs here and there. I just really can't get behind the whole gauntlet thing before second boss. It's just like, man, I don't want to have to sit there doing a gauntlet for 4 minutes because like 4 mobs, man. Come on. So yeah, anyways, hope you guys enjoyed this little video. I guess I can just skip forward to the end. I'll show you kind of like what the overalls look like really quickly. Obviously, overalls are dictated by pacing, composition, etc., etc. So nothing crazy. But my breakdown of Shado-pan, like the majority of my damage is being pushed into Flurry Strikes, Keg Smash, and Breath of Fire. And that feels good. Breath of Fire and Keg Smash being like one of your top damage dealers and not it being Flurry Strikes like we're currently seeing, or your Harmonic Surge damage is a nice change of pace. So I think Brewmaster is playing really, 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 really well. If you are interested in getting on beta and testing it for yourself, I highly recommend it. My build will be down below. Hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I'll catch you all in the next one. Peace.